Over the last few weeks, I've done multiple videos going back and re-looking at past quarterback classes. We've done 2021, 2022, 2017, and 2007. And today we're going to take a look at the 2019 class. It has been requested a lot, and this class is also a very interesting one. You had 4 guys who were drafted to be franchise players, 4 more guys who had potential to be franchise players, and then 3 guys who are perennial backups. Really, only 2 to 3 guys in this draft class ended up doing much, and the rest would end up as disappointing, and one was even tragic. In today's video, we're going to take a look back at the 2019 quarterback draft class and talk about just how bad it was and what happened to each and every player from it. But before we get started, I am joined by my buddy Cade Rathbone, who in my opinion is a big time up and coming YouTuber. A couple of his draft videos popped up in my feed, and as you guys know, I love to bring smaller creators onto the channel, so today Cade is going to help me out, and we're going to talk about the 2019 quarterback class. Currently, he is about 45 subscribers away from 1,000, so quickly be sure to go over to his channel, hit his subscribe button, and let's get him monetized. Before we get started though, also be sure to subscribe to my channel if you love football. Let me know what topic I should cover next, and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I do upload. Now let's talk about the 2019 NFL Draft. So the first guy we need to talk about from the 2019 NFL Draft was Trace McSorley. But going back in time, he grew up in the state of Virginia and was just a 3-star recruit. Originally he was committed with James Franklin at Vanderbilt, but when Franklin took the Penn State job, McSorley would follow him. He was rated as a consensus 3-star recruit on every single website and would not play his first year in Happy Valley. As a redshirt freshman, he'd appear in 6 games before he would take over in 2016 after the departure of Christian Hackenberg. McSorley had a tremendous career at Penn State, as over his next 3 years, he would start in 40 games and would go 31-9 as a Nittany Lions quarterback. He had nearly 10,000 yards, 77 touchdowns, and 30 more scores on the ground. He broke multiple Penn State records, and despite not having the ideal physical traits for the NFL, he would end up being drafted. He got taken with the 197th overall pick by the Ravens and became the 3rd-string quarterback behind Lamar Jackson and RG3. Sadly though, things didn't really work out for him in Baltimore, as in total he would play in 3 games in 2 years, throwing for 1 touchdown. The most well-known aspect of him was his TikTok song, and after the 2020 season, he was sent over to Arizona, where he actually started 1 game. In total, he threw for 412 yards, with 0 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Unfortunately, Trace McSorley never lived up to the hype in the NFL, but to be fair, I don't really know if there was any to begin with. He had a great college career, and will go down as a college football legend in the 2010s.
This next quarterback's been referred to... Wait a minute. What's up, guys? What's good? Let's do this thing. This next quarterback has been referred to as the hidden gem of the 2019 class. Gardner Minshew has been on a football journey, and it's only right to take it back to the start. Let's take it back to the beginning of his college journey, where it was anything but ordinary for the usual NFL quarterback. Minshew began his college career at Troy, where he'd leave due to recognizing the coaching staff's immediate favoritism in the quarterback he was competing against. Gardner would find himself at Northwest Mississippi Community College, where he would then transfer to East Carolina, then finish his college career all the way at Washington State University. Fast forward to the NFL Draft, where the Jacksonville Jaguars would select him 178th overall in the 6th round. As a 6th-round quarterback in the NFL, expectations are typically low, and you rarely see these types of players get real opportunities to consistently start for NFL franchises. Against all odds, Minshew would roll out into his rookie year with a whopping 12 starts. He would leave his rookie year with a superior stat line of 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 3,200 yards through the air. Uncle Rico was a fan favorite by the end of the season, cementing himself as the Jaguars' starting quarterback for the upcoming season. Minshew's season would be cut short to 8 starts due to a fracture in his right thumb. He finished the season with 2,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. The following 2021 season, the Jacksonville Jaguars would draft Trevor Lawrence 1st overall, who would securely lock up the new starting quarterback role for the team. In fashion of Gardner's whole career, he would choose to bet on himself again, as he desired to compete for a starting role within the NFL. Minshew demanded a trade where he would land on the Philadelphia Eagles for a conditional 6th-round pick. During Minshew's 2 years with the Eagles, he would start 4 games, leading them to a record of 1-3 with a stat line of 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. For the 2023 season, Gardner's next stop would be sunny Indianapolis, where he would sign a 1-year contract for $3.5 million. Minshew's name would be called yet again, as he started 13 games, finishing the year with a record of 7-6, 3,300 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Today, Gardner Minshew resides in Las Vegas, where he recently signed a 2-year, $25 million deal with the Raiders. As we look back at his journey, there is no question that Gardner not only has a fantastic mustache, but has strongly outperformed his expectations as a 6th-round pick.
The next guy we have to talk about is another dude who is a legend for his college football program, Clayton Thorson. Coming out of Wheaton, Illinois, Thorson was a pretty big deal in the area as he was an all-conference and all-state player, but was honestly overlooked when it came to recruiting. He decided to go to Northwestern, where he took over as the starting quarterback as just a redshirt freshman. That was after Trevor Siemian left, and after that, Thorson would have a decorated and insane career for them. He would start 53 games over the next 4 seasons, throwing for 10,731 yards, 61 touchdowns, and 27 rushing scores. He had the most consecutive starts at quarterback in Big Ten history, and is tied with Colt McCoy in Power 5 all time. He holds multiple Northwestern career records, and honestly changed the face of that Northwestern program. Because of that, he'd end up being drafted with the 167th overall pick in the 5th round by the Eagles, but was waived before the season could even begin. After that, he'd go over to the Dallas Cowboys practice squad, before in 2020 he would sign with the Giants practice squad. He would eventually get elevated to the active roster in December, and would play in their Week 13 and Week 15 games. Sadly, it really wouldn't last, as he was eventually placed on IR before he was drafted by the Houston Gamblers in the USFL. Things really wouldn't work out for him there, as he'd be benched after starting his first 2 games, would get injured, and then would get another chance to start. Sadly, he was released by the Gamblers, and as of now, I don't really know what he's doing. Thorson never made it work in the NFL, but just like McSorley, he was great in college, and at least he has that going for him.
Our next quarterback on this list is none other than the North Dakota Bison, Easton Stick. Throughout the high school recruiting process, Easton was an outlier to the majority of this list and wasn't the highest recruited quarterback. He received offers from South Dakota and North Dakota State, where he'd eventually take his talents to Fargo, North Dakota. In the 2019 NFL Draft, Easton Stick would be selected in the 5th round by the Los Angeles Chargers. During that season, he would serve as a 3rd-string quarterback to Tyrod Taylor and longtime franchise quarterback Phillip Rivers. In the following season, Justin Herbert would be selected in the 2020 NFL Draft at 6th overall, which would push Easton Stick's first starting opportunity all the way to 2023. In Easton's first starting debut versus the Las Vegas Raiders, he posted a stat line of 257 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The remaining 3 games of the season, he'd average over 200 yards a game, but wouldn't record a single touchdown or interception. Easton Stick's career has been difficult to judge as he's received limited snaps as a starting quarterback, but his 2023 performance was enough for the Chargers to offer him a 1-year extension as their backup quarterback. Strangely, 5 years later, it still feels too premature to deem Easton Stick a win or loss of a draft pick. Receiving an extension as a day 3 quarterback is a win in itself, but we're going to need to see a couple more starts before we draw our final conclusion.
The next guy we need to talk about has a great story. In the 4th round of the 2019 NFL Draft, the New England Patriots tried to get their QB of the future and decided to take Jarrett Stidham with their 133rd overall selection. Stidham was a huge deal, and if you followed him in high school or college, you knew he had some potential in the NFL. He went to Stephenville High School in Texas, and as a senior threw for nearly 3,000 yards at 35 touchdowns, and also ran for over 1,000 yards and 15 scores on the ground. At one point he was considered a 5-star recruit, but ultimately settled around that 4-star range. He decided to commit to Texas Tech, but would later flip to Baylor before it all began. He ended up being the backup to Seth Russell in 2015, but after Russell had that horrible neck injury, Stidham would take over for the remainder of the year, and would throw for 1,200 yards with 12 touchdowns and 2 picks. He looked pretty good, and then had some injury issues. Combine that with everything going on with Baylor at the time, he decided to spend a semester at McLennan Community College before he would transfer to Auburn. He would be immediately named the starting quarterback for the Tigers, and over the next 2 years, he was solid for them. He had nearly 6,000 yards and 43 touchdowns, and even led the Tigers to an SEC championship game. After 2 years with the Tigers, he would declare for the 2019 NFL Draft, where he was obviously taken by the Patriots. He was the 2nd-string quarterback behind Tom Brady. Stidham was seen as the successor. Unfortunately for him though, they would bring in Cam Newton, and Stidham never got a chance to start for them. He would play in a total of 8 games at New England before he would go over to Las Vegas. While he was with the Raiders, he would start 2 games, and in total threw for nearly 700 yards with 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. After 1 year at Las Vegas, he'd moved to Denver for this past season, where he would start 2 games, throwing for 500 yards with 2 touchdowns. It looks like Stidham is still with the Broncos, and honestly he has been a little underwhelming in the NFL. I remember for quite some time people talking about him being the future of the Patriots, and part of it is he never got his chance, and part of it was he didn't really impress when he got a chance. But either way, Stidham will go down as a disappointment, and it seems like he'll be a perennial backup.
The Wolfpack alumni Ryan Finley slots in next on this list. Coming out of high school, Ryan was a 3-star recruit where he would initially sign and take his talents to Boise State. Heading into his junior year, all the way across the U.S., North Carolina State would present him with an opportunity to be the starting quarterback for the school. Ryan would then hit the portal with no hesitation. Finley would then spend 3 years as the Wolfpack's starting QB, finishing his final season with 25 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and just under 4,000 passing yards. In the 2019 NFL Draft, Ryan Finley would be selected at the top of the 4th round by the Cincinnati Bengals, with Zach Taylor taking over as head coach. During his rookie year, he would spend the season backing up Andy Dalton until October 29th, where Ryan would be named the starter of the Bengals. Ryan Finley would start the following 3 games for the Bengals, resulting in an 0-3 record. Ryan's stat line over those 3 games would consist of a completion rate of 47%, averaging 150 yards a game, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 4 fumbles. After this run, the Bengals would finish their season 2-14, where they'd be awarded the first overall pick of the 2020 NFL Draft, which they would use to draft the LSU Tiger, Joe Burrow. During the 2020 season, Ryan would start one final game before being traded in the following free agency period to the Texans. The Bengals would package Finley with a 6th and 7th round pick swap with the Texans. Less than a month after this exchange, the Texans would be forced to cut Ryan Finley due to an overcrowded QB room containing Watson, Tyrod Taylor, rookie 3rd round pick Davis Mills, and newly signed quarterback Jeff Driscoll to push the room over capacity. Eventually, Ryan Finley would call it quits and decide to ride off into the sunset of retirement. While the NFL route never quite panned out for Ryan, he seems to be happily pursuing his new journey as a professional pickleball player.
Up next, we have another really interesting story, and that is Will Grier. After originally going to South Lake Christian Academy in North Carolina, he'd eventually transfer to Davidson Day High School, where he would play for his dad. As a senior, Will Grier was absolutely berserk. He threw for 5,000 yards with 77 touchdowns. Because of this, he was named Mr. Football USA and became a 5-star recruit after nearly 15,000 career yards and 195 touchdown passes. Grier was absolutely insane and eventually decided to commit to Florida. After being the backup with both Trayon Harris and Jeff Driscoll in 2014, he would decide to redshirt. As a redshirt freshman in 2015, he would once again compete with Trayon Harris for the job, but he would lose it. Eventually, though, he was named the starter, and Grier began to go off. He quickly threw for 1,200 yards with 12 total touchdowns, and was low-key about to take off before he was then suspended. This happened on October 12th, as he used PEDs, and was done for the year. He ended up being done, and then would decide to transfer. After sitting out a year, he would transfer to West Virginia, and became the starter for the 2017 season, and would have a terrific 2 years there. He threw for over 7,000 yards with nearly 80 total touchdowns. Grier was even a Heisman candidate at one point, and won a ton of games for West Virginia, and was seen as a guy who could hopefully make it into the NFL. He was taken in the 3rd round with the 100th overall pick by the Panthers, and then would become the 3rd-string quarterback behind both Cam Newton and Kyle Allen. In Week 16, he'd make his first career start against the Colts, but unfortunately, he had 3 interceptions. He would then start the following game and throw a pick 6, and from there it seemed like he was done. He had an 0-2 record as a starter, and never played again in the NFL. He spent time in Cincinnati, New England, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Dallas, but has not played a game, and I don't think he will play another game. Unfortunately for Grier, he got his one moment and just didn't perform, so he was done. Up next, we get to our first guy who was supposed to be a franchise quarterback, and that was Drew Lock. Going back in time, his dad played for the Mizzou Tigers, and as a Mizzou fan myself, I clearly remember Drew Lock, and he's my favorite Mizzou player of all time. He ended up going to Lee Summit High School in the Kansas City area, and became a huge deal. It eventually came down to Mizzou in Tennessee, and then he decided to commit to the Tigers. Fun fact, he was also a basketball star. Drew Lock would arrive in 2015, and after Matty Mock would struggle, he'd be thrown in for the rest of the year. This would be Gary Pinkel's final season as head coach, and in 8 starts, he'd throw for 1,300 yards with 4 touchdowns and 8 picks. It was extremely disappointing. In 2016, Barry Odom would take over, and Drew Lock would showcase his arm. He threw for nearly 3,500 yards and 23 touchdowns, but still had a lot of interceptions, and they only went 4-8. In 2017, Lock would really begin to take off, as he threw for nearly 4,000 yards with 44 touchdowns and 13 picks. At the time, that was the SEC single-season touchdown record, which was later broken by Joe Burrow, and Drew Lock could have declared for the draft, but instead he decided to come back for one more season. He was a projected top 10 pick, but after a somewhat underwhelming 2018 campaign, his stock would fall a little bit. In total at Mizzou, he threw for 12,000 yards with 99 touchdowns, but still had a decent amount of hype. After being considered a late first-round pick, he would fall to pick number 42 with the Denver Broncos, and he was right away seen as the future. In 2019, he would start the last 5 games, leading the Broncos to a 4-1 record, and he threw for 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. It looked like 2020 was going to be his breakout campaign, but it didn't really end up happening. He ended up starting 13 games, throwing for 3,000 yards with 16 touchdowns, but he had an insanely high 15 interceptions. He also only won 4 games, and after that, he was pretty much done. He started 3 games for Denver in 2021 before he was eventually traded to Seattle, where he did not play in 2022. In 2023, he would start 2 games for the Seahawks, throwing for 500 yards with 3 touchdowns and 3 picks. It looks like Locke is going to be a journeyman backup, just like former Mizzou legend Blaine Gabbert, and ultimately that's not that bad, but after his hot start with the Broncos in 2019, Locke ended up flaming out and will go down as a disappointment. The final guy I'm going to get to talk about today is Dwayne Haskins. At one point, he was a huge deal, as coming out of the DC area, he would absolutely blow up for the Bullis School. He threw for 5,000 yards and 54 touchdowns, and after originally committing to Maryland, he eventually decided to flip to Ohio State. Haskins would redshirt at Ohio State in 2016. Before 2017, he would end up being the backup. He ended up appearing in 8 games, throwing for 4 touchdowns with 1 interception. Haskins was seen as a big deal going into 2018, and was going to take over for the prestigious Buckeyes. In his 1 year with the Buckeyes, he ended up having an incredible year. He started 14 games, led Ohio State to a 13-1 record, threw for 4,831 yards, had 50 touchdowns, and was named a first-team All-Big Ten selection. Haskins would spend 1 year with Ohio State before he would declare for the 2019 NFL Draft, where he was drafted by the Washington Redskins in the first round. He'd be taken 15th overall, and everybody thought this guy was the future, including myself. Unfortunately, things would not go as planned. In 2019, he would start 7 games with the Redskins, leading them to a 2-5 record after only throwing for 1,300 yards with 7 touchdowns and 7 picks. In 2020, he'd once again get another chance, and this time it was worse. He started 6 games, led them to a 1-5 record, and had 5 touchdowns compared to 7 interceptions. Coaches were unimpressed with his work ethic, he broke some rules, and just seemed like a little bit of a basket case behind the scenes. After that, they decided to part ways, and he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2021. Unfortunately, this is where it gets dark. I absolutely hate how I have to talk about this, but unfortunately on April 9th of 2022, Dwayne Haskins would be hit by a truck. Ultimately, it also looked like there was something else in his system at the time, but it doesn't take away from the absolute tragedy of it. Dwayne Haskins' life was taken at a very early age, and it's just extremely unfortunate. While on the football field he didn't live up to the hype, nobody wanted to see this happen. It's really unfortunate.
Daniel Jones, the 6th overall pick, falls next on our list. The Danny Dimes roller coaster has been just as crazy since the day we jumped on it, Thursday, April 25th, 2019. During this draft process, it was apparent that the New York Giants had a strong need for quarterback, but very few scouts and NFL executives had Daniel Jones graded as a top 10 draft pick. The selection of Jones at 6 overall made sense needs-wise for the franchise, but felt like a bit of a reach with all the talent still left on the board. Danny Dimes would kick off his NFL career with a fumbling mess of a rookie year. While he would impress through the air with a stat line of over 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 12 INTs, Jones would lead the league in fumbles with 19 on the year. The next 2 seasons in 2020 and 2021, Danny would improve his fumbling mishaps but take a step back in the passing yards and efficiency. This would all boil down to the season of 2022 where Daniel Jones would have his breakout year as a quarterback. With a new head coach stepping into office, offensive-minded Brian DeBoll would take the reins of the New York Giants and strike lightning into this offense. The New York Giants would finish their year 9-7 with a playoff win over the Minnesota Vikings. Daniel Jones would strongly contribute to the success of this with over 3,200 yards through the air, a league-leading interception rate of 1.1% per attempt, 22 total touchdowns, and 700 yards on the ground. The New York Giants had hit on the quarterback that they envisioned at 6 overall. The franchise would waste no time and sign their franchise quarterback to a 4-year, $160 million extension through 2026. With confidence flooded throughout the Giants facility, the team would head into 2023 with high expectations. Daniel Jones' 5th season as a Giant would end up being an injury-riddled mess, where he'd finish the year with only starting 6 games and a stat line of 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 4 fumbles. Now that you've seen the ups and downs of Daniel Jones' career, you can start to understand why I call this a roller coaster. Every season has been a new story. Above all the things I've mentioned, we must acknowledge that it is a win in itself for an NFL quarterback to last this long in the league. Even majority of first-round quarterbacks lose their starting role or switch teams by the end of their rookie contract. Truly, the story is unwritten here for Danny Dimes. Yes, we know he doesn't have elite potential, but there has been flashes of him taking his team to the playoffs. Who knows what's next? Strap in for the ride. The prophecy from Allen, Texas will be the one to wrap our list. Coming out of high school as a Texas football legend, Kyler would lead Allen back-to-back state championships, finishing with a record of 42-0. It is no secret that Kyler would be a heavily recruited quarterback where he would take his 5-star talents to Texas A&M. After his freshman year, he would transfer to OU where he would sit on the bench for a season behind Heisman Baker Mayfield, then take over his junior year where he would return the Heisman Trophy back to Norman, Oklahoma. Heading into the 2019 draft process, it was no secret that Kyler Murray would be taken first overall by the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler and Cliff Kingsbury would begin their new era in Arizona with an underwhelming record of 5-10-1. The AP Offensive Rookie of the Year himself would contribute to the team with an impressive stat line of over 4,200 yards, 24 total touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. In the following 2 years, Kyler would make it to the Pro Bowl in back-to-back seasons and will the Cardinals to a playoff game in 2021. Murray had carried the Cardinals as far as they would go in his first 3 years, and now he was seeking a contract to extend and protect his future. Before kicking off the 2022 season, Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals would agree to a 5-year, $230 million extension. Wisely, Kyler had now ensured his job security as he understood the high injury risk of playing in the NFL. Kyler Murray's 4th season would turn out to be injury-riddled and extremely unfortunate. In Week 8, he would suffer a hamstring strain to only return in Week 14 where he'd suffer a non-contact ACL tear. This major setback delayed Kyler's chance of seeing the field all the way until Week 10 of the following 2023 season. That 2023 season, he posted a stat line of 275 yards total per game, 13 total touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Kyler Murray, while not deemed an elite quarterback in the NFL, has surely lived up to his first overall pick status. The Texas legend has displayed multiple seasons of high-end production resulting in 2 Pro Bowl selections, all under a questionable front office. As the brightest light of this shaky quarterback class, Kyler is here to stay. And if you happen to think otherwise, I will gladly give you 230 million reasons why he will.
So yeah, today Cade and I did a relook at the 2019 NFL quarterback class, talked about who these guys were, how their careers panned out, and what they're up to now. Again, I think Cade is a great dude and has a great channel, so be sure to go over to his page and subscribe, as I really enjoy his content and I think you will as well. But what do you guys think? What do you think of the 2019 quarterback class? What do you think of each and every guy who was drafted? And what class, position, or topic should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my videos in the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.